Oh yeah, it is like handled. Oh, that's much better. All right, what up, buttholes? So, callback. So, I'm going to be demonstrating Vue.js for you guys tonight, and I'll just tell you a little bit about this app that we're all building. It's called Barkwire. Barkwire is a dating app for dogs. Those of you who were at Frontend Face-Off last year, it's the exact same app. But we're going to hopefully put a new spin on it, show you some new things, and hopefully highlight the differences between some of the frameworks out there today. So I'm going to give myself a little timer so I don't go too damn long. And just fair warning, CJ live codes for a living, and I haven't done it since Galvanize, so minus your expectations of me by about 10. Okay, cool. So one of the things that's kind of neat about Vue is that it has a lot of really cool build tooling around it. So for example, if I do something like Vue create Barkwire, I get all these options for how I can build the app. This is things like all that Webpack config bullshit that really doesn't have anything to do with your app or like how you provide the value. It's all plumbing, right? So we get an opportunity to have all that stuff kind of pre-wired for us. So I'm going to manually select that I want Babel, I want to use the router, I want to use Vuex, I want to use CSS preprocessor, I don't care about the linter, and we're going to do a little bit of testing also. We're going to TDD this. And then I can say, oh, for my CSS preprocessor, I want to use Sass, I want to use Cypress for testing, this is how I want my config set up, and I don't want to save that as a preset. So while this is all installing, as Brooks mentioned, I ran the Ember meetup for 3 years. I represented Ember here last year. I love Ember. I still love Ember. They were right about everything and still are. However, I also like being employed. So I picked up Vue.js, and it's those of you who are from like a more React-y kind of component-based background will recognize that it's a very similar lightweight approach to web development, but it has a lot of the kind of what I call like developer ergonomics that a more opinionated framework like Ember offers. So to get started, okay, so it did all the setup for me, and if I go into Barkwire and do npm run serve, I have a development server running for this. So the first thing that I usually do when I do like a kind of boilerplate build like this is like I go in and just delete all the boilerplate. So I go in here, like this logo, a lot of stuff that will like help you know that you got everything set up correctly. I don't want any of that. So I'm going to delete the views. Over in the main app file, I'll get rid of this kind of boilerplate nav and the boilerplate styles they give you. And one last place, the router. So get rid of all these default routes. A lot of this stuff is good. If you've never used Vue before, a lot of this stuff can give you an idea of how all these different pieces fit together. And all right, so we're good to go. Next thing that I want to do is do what I call like a smoke test. Just make sure that the tests are reading the right thing, applications running, all that kind of stuff. So what I'll do is go over to the, I mentioned that I was using end-to-end tests. Let's just kind of get those wired up. Let's say this is the Barkwire app, and I'm going to say it displays the heading Barkwire. And visiting the app is the thing we're going to do pretty much every time. So let's put that in a before each hook. And say, all right, before every test that I run, I want to go to the app. And the H1 on that should read Barkwire. And I'm kind of a jerk about indentation and singles and doubles and all that kind of stuff, so I'm going to fix all that. All right, so when I want to actually run these tests, I can do npm run test e2e, and oops, got to actually be in the app, that helps. So all this stuff was wired up for me. I didn't need to specify test folders or do any of that kind of stuff. And it's going to run Cypress on this nascent app. And there's some boilerplate that kind of comes with that. But if I run the specs, I should have my first failing test. Oops, God damn it, hang on. Trying to get it to not overscan off the screen, so I don't get to use all my cool window management buddies. With my test, yeah. It's letting me know. And that actually goes inside all this. I haven't had anything to drink tonight, so that was a joke, by the way. All right, there you go. There's our first failing test. Goes to the side, doesn't see anything. That's kind of what we'd expect, right? So if I go over to the app, I could say, hey, I want to have a header. And let's put Barkwire in it. And let's see if we can get that test to pass now. Hey, it passed! I got a green check mark. Love it. Yeah! Okay, cool. So our smoke test passed, pretty much good to go. And so let's do just a little bit of setup for the next feature that we want to do. And also, like, I don't want you guys to have to watch us write CSS all night. So, like, we're all kind of using a shared style sheet. So if I go over to a previous version of this app and go down here and yank these styles out. Now if I run it, it should look like the beautiful Barkwire that everybody knows and loves. Down the footer, I'm going to say, give us some good legal text. This is copyright. The Barkwire Corporation. And let's write our first feature test. So for this one, I'm going to say, most important thing that Barkwire needs to do is list dogs. So I'll know that I've successfully completed this feature when, for example, it lists 3 dogs. Our test data set's going to have 3 dogs in it. And the way that I'll know that that happens is if I can get dogs li should have length 3. Cool, so that's my next failing test. And so it's spinning over there. So how am I gonna get this to pass? What I'm gonna do is hop over to the views folder that was auto-generated for me, and I'm going to make a dogs.view. This is called a single file component. It's gonna have the template, all my logic, and all my styles kind of in one place. And then I'm gonna go over to the router and tell it that the first route that I want is has the name dogs and the path /dogs, and the component that I want to use to represent that is dogs. I'm going to pull that in from dogs, say at views dogs. Now, like, I don't have any navigation. I can't navigate to that path. So the other thing that I want to do is say, all right, for my index, which maps to the URL / I want to redirect to the route dogs. So now when you hit that index route, it should redirect you to our dogs buddy. Now, this dogs view that we made that was empty, three components, or 3 pieces that you need in view And the first one, the only required one, is the template. It needs to be something in there. So if I say this is a section of class dogs, and I'm going to have a list of dogs, so we'll represent that with an unordered list, and let's just make 3 empty list items. That should be enough to get this test to pass. Let's see if it does. Hey, and it does. I got another green check mark. So if we want to use the test to kind of drive the design of this application, then the next thing that would help me know that like I've actually developed it was it lists the second dog as Bilbo Wagons. So this uses array syntax, so that's the second match for that. And if I look inside of that for an H3, that should have text Bilbo Wagons. Cool. So I got another failing test. Let's hop over here and go to that second list item, and I'm going to make a section here. I'm going to call it a dog listing, and let's just give it an H3 of Bilbo Wagons, hard-coded, and see if we can get that test to pass. Oh man, I'm just lighting the world on fire. Such a good programmer. So, some other things that are going to be part of a standard dog listing are we're going to have it's a card essentially. So we're going to have a figure in there, and inside of that figure, we're going to have an image. And we'll leave the source blank for right now. The alt text on this is just going to be something to let us know that we do have a placeholder there. There's going to be a fig caption on it that's got some kind of caption. And then right below that, we're going to have a description of the dog. It's like their dating profile. So does all that show up? Test still passed. There we go. That kind of looks like what we're shooting for on this thing. So now the next thing that lets us get to the next piece of progress on the app is if I say, cool, well, it should list the third dog as Helga Hufflepuff. So if I increment that up and say Helga Hufflepuff, well, shoot, that one's going to spin because I can copy and paste this, but at that point we're not really using component-y kind of stuff, right? So how about I extract that this is like a repeatable thing? That's a good candidate for a component. So I'm going to hop over to the components folder that was auto-generated for me, make a dog listing.view, and I'm going to yank this out and put it right in that new component that I made. And over here in dogs, I should now be able to just say dog listing as if it were an element. But I need to tell Vue that yo, don't try to find this in JavaScript or something. I want to import it. So I'll say, hey, let's do components, dog listing, and then what this view essentially is something that includes the component dog listing. And if I did all that right, this test should still pass. And it does. Cool. Still don't have the Helga Hufflepuff thing. That's all right. That's what we're going to do next. So to get this part of it to pass, we have an API that delivers all these dogs dynamically. And the way that Vue handles that is with a plugin called Vuex. It's a lot like MobX in React. And it's essentially like a global big pile of state manager. So what I want to do with this is say, the only state that I care about in this app right now is dogs. The way that I'm going to add dogs to that is I'm going to make a mutation called update dogs. And that takes state in, and I'll say state.dogs equals the dogs that I passed in. And the way that my app is going to be able to access that is through this action. So we'll say something like fetch dogs. To fetch dogs, so I'm going to use Axios on this. I love fetch, and I love using native features and that kind of shit. I would highly recommend using Axios regardless in a Vue app, because things like the interceptors and stuff really help with testing a lot. So we're actually going to use Axios for the actual fetch call. So we'll import Axios. And we'll say, and I want to use async await on this. So we'll say async. We'll destructure the response and say axios.get. The base URL for all this is, and CJ, correct me if I'm wrong, HTTPS barkwireapi.now.sh. Does that sound right? Right, for the actual call. So I'm going to say, let's use that base URL /dogs. That should give me like a dynamic list of these dogs. And then all I need to do is call that mutation that I wrote. I'll commit update dogs and pass it data.dogs. So my state manager should be good to go on this. If I hop over to the dogs view that I made, what I want to do is trigger that whenever this component is created. And I'll say, hey, store, why don't you dispatch that beautiful fetch dogs method that I made. And then if I want to have access to that stuff that gets populated into the store, what I'm going to do is make a computed property and say, hey, component, if you want to access dogs, you can get it from this.store.state.dogs. Cool, so now this view should have access to a list of dogs. And if I want to use that, I should be able to say, get rid of this repetition in here. And kind of like an Angular style, uses directives in a lot of the templates. And so we can say v4, that's our like looping utility, and say for dog in dogs. And then for this component, we'll bind dog to the dog instance in that loop. So the last thing that we need to make this all pop is in that dog listing component that we made, we need to tell it to expect the dog that we're passing in. And there's kind of a neat thing that Vue does. And I think it's a good example of the kind of like what I mean by developer ergonomics. If I say props, and I say I'm expecting a dog and it's of type object, it will do some light type checking on that for me and throw a warning if I accidentally passed in a string or something. I can also destructure all that out and have all the different aspects of that and type check all of those also. It's just like a really handy nicety. And then inside of this, instead of these static values, I'll now have access to like dog.name and dog.image URL. And since that's JavaScript, I want to bind it, and that colon is a good shorthand for that in Vue. For alt, that's going to be dog.name. And since that's dynamic, I want to bind that also. This fig caption, kind of use a handlebars style syntax. And we'll say that that's the image caption. And then in the paragraph, that's going to be dog.description. And that should be enough to get this to pass. It's not, it looks like I broke something. So the next thing I'm gonna do is hop over to this and see what the heck is going on. Because doing the dog redirection correctly, one of the nice things about Cypress is I can't actually just pull open a console. Cannot read property dogs of undefined. All right, sweet. So where did I not define dogs? So v4 dogs. If anybody sees the mistake I made, feel free to shout it out.
Any Axios call? You did anything, but not weird.
Ah, there you go. He was just waiting for me the whole time.
This dog dot description not need a handle price.
There we go, I got passing test. Ah! I'm sorry, the question was, oh, yes, it most certainly does. All right, and so if I refresh that, we should see like the actual descriptions. And there we go, that kind of looks like a dating app for dogs. All right, so I have passing tests, and there's one more feature that we want to add, and that is I should be able to click on any of these cards and see like an individual dog, and it should map to the URL. You know, like if I want to send that to a buddy of mine and be like, hey, what do you think about Charles Barkley? Pretty cool, huh? It's got to have the individual dog on it. So what we're going to do for that is write a test. So we'll say, list a dog. And for this one, I also want to do a before each on these and say, before each one of these, let's click on Bilbo Wagons, and that should take us to the page. So we're automatically reloading the page every time, but I should be able to say, dogs, li, give me the second one, and then click on it. And that should get us to that Bilbo Wagons page every time. And inside of that, I'll say it shows a single dog. And I'll know that that's done when I can do .dog listing, and should have length of 1. Cool, so do I have my next failing test? Why, yes, I do. It's spinning aimlessly. So to make that pass, I'm going to go over into views. There's a lot that's kind of in common with the dogs list, so I'm going to reuse some of that. And I'm going to copy dogs into dog.view. And over in the router, I'm going to say, hey girl, why don't you use that dog route? And we're going to map this one with a dynamic property in the path. Or pass it an ID, and then otherwise instantiate the dog component. So over in that dog component, we don't need the list anymore. And we're going to call this dog. And still need the component, but instead of, when we create this, fetching all the dogs, let's just get one of them. So we're gonna have like a fetch dog thing, and to that we're gonna pass this $route params ID. That'll get that dynamic URL property for us. And then instead of making dogs available, we're gonna make the matching dog available. And we're gonna do that by just doing a find off of the state, and we'll say dog, dog.id, soft equals this route params ID. And now we need to actually make that. So over here in this, we're just gonna copy fetch dogs and make it fetch dog. And we're gonna pass an ID into that. And instead of update dogs, I'm gonna call this one add dog. So the difference there is that I may already have this loaded. It's an SPA, right? That kind of stuff happens. So we're going to call this add dog, and if the dog already exists, we're not going to do anything, and if the dog doesn't exist, we're going to add it. So to do that, we call this new dog. We're going to say found dog equals state.dogs.find, kind of like that thing we just did. And dog.id soft equals new dog.id. So then we can say if not found dog, then state.dogs, and we'll just add the new dog. That should kind of handle our use case for that just fine. Let's see how our tests are doing. Oh, I know it's not going to pass because I actually have to link to this new route. So over here, inside of that, I'm going to use the view router, make a router link, and I need to tell it where to go. So I'll say, how about you go to the route that I've named dog, and that's really nice too, because if I decide to change the URL structure of all this kind of stuff, I don't need to also fuck with every place that I link to something. And then I want you to also use the params ID and dog.id. So let's see what that does. All right, that didn't work. So looks like if I actually look at the thing that we're doing and I hover over that, it's not actually linking. So next thing I would do, hey, what do you know? We got a code issue. Missing comma, fucking JavaScript. So, right there. Hey, I got a green check mark! All right, so we're short on time. We're going to call that good on the tests. Last thing that I want to do is actually deploy this thing. So one of the other things that's cool that comes with Vue CLI is I could do something like Firebase init, tell it where I want to go. I'm going to host it, and there's my Barkwire project. Vue public folders are called dist, and I do want to configure it as a single page app, and then I can do something like npm run build, and this gives me like my cool minified, gzipped, all that kind of like cool shit version of the app, and I can just do Firebase deploy, and that is live on the internet. And then all I have to do is add this and commit. Booyah, achieved. Ta-da! And that's Vue.js. Thank you very much. And I don't think I mentioned it at the beginning of the thing. My name is Kyle Coberly. I work for a company called Health Scholars, and I run a conference called Develop Denver, like I was just talking about earlier, and that's me. Bye.